Podcast, where mental health meets real life. I'm your host, Samantha Ariza, therapist, educator, mom, semi-normal human being, but overall I want to be your go-to for this mental wellness health journey where we talk about growth, healing, and a lot of other topics. Around here, we believe that mental health doesn't have to be stiff or scary. We keep it real, we keep it practical, and hey, we have some fun along the way because you know what? Life is messy and we're all just trying to figure it out. But just a reminder, this is not therapy and not really a replacement for therapy. This is just where you can get some more information, get some more ideas, and get some help along the way. Each week, you'll get honest insights, science backed tools, and stories that remind you that you're not alone in this. Whether you're on your own healing journey or helping someone else along the way, there's something here for you. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, some green tea, get kind of cozy, and let's dive in. Because today we are talking with Brooke. And Brooke is someone, again, I work with Minding Your Mind. We've talked a couple of times at presentations, but Brooke has a really good story to share. Not only does she talk about her journey with mental health, she is also going to share some of the things that she does now. Brooke is a somatic CBT coach, and she also does nutrition and herbalists, and she does a lot around, she doesn't call it holistic mental health, but she does a lot of this mind, earth, and body work. And I think this is something that's super important when we talk about mental health. Mental health is not just the brain, it is a whole experience. And one of the major reasons why I wanted to bring Brooke and talk to her about her story, because that is where she is now. She has had a whole journey with traditional therapy and mental health, as well as this, I'm going to call it alternative, but it's something that we really need to address as well. But I hope that you will enjoy having Brooke's story. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been excited about this. I've been excited because I watch all your content online, and I think it's going to be a very interesting kind of conversation because I know you speak for Minding Your Mind, and you do your own speaking gigs, and so you talk about your mental health, but I know
Yeah.
that you do more of a different side of mental health as well as being more natural. And so that's always fascinating to me because I always think like I love that holistic view. I think mental health is so much bigger than just your brain. And so I've
Mm.
been really excited to hear you talk about all this stuff.
Nice.
So I'm very glad to have you on and that you said yes, because I think it's going to be a great conversation. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm happy to be
Um,
here.
all right. So before we get really into anything, um, I guess the first question I want to ask is when you talk about your mental health journey, how do you usually describe it?
It's a good question. Usually when I talk about it, I often talk about kind of the phases that it went through. So I'll often say, when it started, which was when I was um a preteen, like
Hmm.
that this moment in time when most of us are really going through a lot of transition. And for a lot of us, that's when our mental health issues really kind of show up.
Hmm.
Before that, it seems like behavioral things or things you're going to grow out of. And then I started to realize in my preteens, like the feeling of just being anxious and not really understanding what I was feeling was just continuing and kind of worsening. And so when I talk about it, I often talk about how like that preteen year was my first moment where I was like, I think maybe there's something going on with me because I just don't feel right. I couldn't really put my finger on what it was. And I talk a lot about, I call myself like I used to be the crazy person, like there's a part of me that really wants to like take back that word crazy and make it
Okay.
not such a stigmatized word because I did a lot of crazy things when I was struggling and I didn't know what tools to use. And those were all moments too where I really noticed that something was going on. Where I'm like, why am I doing this? Like I know logically I shouldn't do these things, these impulsive behaviors, or reacting the way that I'm reacting, but I couldn't really control it at the time. And then I talk about, as I became older and I built self-awareness and I got the right resources, that I started to understand both in retrospect the things I went through when I was younger, um, and then also the things I do today and how they connect to those younger years. And yeah, using the right tools to really move through them and transform them into superpowers.
Oh, I love that. Superpowers. That's awesome. So, what do you feel like is important for people to understand before we really get into a mental health kind of conversation?
I think what's important to understand is the way that I look at mental health is really multifaceted. So, I may say things that are related to clinical kind of views of mental health and certain modalities that I learned from like the Western world and theoretical modalities and philosophies around mental health. But then I also really tap into like the embodiment of mental health and the emotional mental health aspect of things. And I think it's an important distinction because sometimes I think when we get to talking about mental health, we can get really caught up in the clinical side, like the pharmaceuticals and what modalities are being used, and are you in therapy? And those things are all important and things that I have used myself. But I also know that there's another side to it that I've been exploring in my own healing and healing with clients that we can talk about. That's just really an important aspect so that, I cover the full gamut of mental health and mental health healing and recovery.
No, I love that. Like I said, I think it's a big important thing. We get so close-minded, but there's so many other things out there that I think we need to kind of broaden our perspectives and pull in as much as we can. I know you're
Mhm.
mentioning that there is another side that you work with clients. Can you give me a little bit more about that? Because that's I've been excited about that conversation too.
Yeah, yeah. So the way that I describe it, I mean, it's really like in the most basic term, a holistic view of mental and emotional well-being. But holistic has become such a kind of, overused term. Like some people use it and they're not using it appropriately at all.
Mm,
So I try to avoid it as much as possible. And I usually try to say more like mind, body, earth based,
mhm,
because my understanding of mental health and just humanity in general is that we have to think about our mind, like the cognition part. How are we thinking about things? What are our perspectives? What are our beliefs? What are our values? How do those impact our behavior? But then there's
mhm,
also the body piece that is huge and broad. It goes from somatics. So like how are you actually feeling your emotional experience in your actual physical body or physiology? Um, like for me when I was younger, I thought I had a GI condition, but I was
mhm,
really experiencing a lot of anxiety. And so it was manifesting in my body. And had I understood somatics and like the bottom up approach to mental health, maybe I could have put two and two together earlier of like, oh, when I feel stressed, when my mind is swirling, my stomach hurts, and like, so we talk a lot about the somatic piece, but body also incorporates like how we treat our bodies, what we're putting in our bodies, what are we eating. And so there's also that physiological aspect of it too. And then the earth based is really like how are we interacting with our environment. And
mm.
I'm also an herbalist and I've been practicing herbalism for almost 10 years now. And so I also utilize a lot of nature's gifts in ways that are supportive to mental health, but it's also the relationship that we have with the planet because, we don't really talk about that. And like most kids are stuck inside despite there being growing bodies of evidence that they're calling eco psychology, which I get a little annoyed when things get pulled into the theory, but it's like
Yes.
naturally we should be outside. Like
Yes.
you can call it eco psychology if that's what it takes to actually study it and reintroduce it as a concept to the modern world. But the earth based is really like getting outside. There's so much evidence that shows like the chemicals, phytochemicals that come off of trees when you walk in a forest is not only good for your mental health, but also really good for your physiological health, your body health. Like if you have chronic illness and you stand in the forest, it's like proven to be good for you. So
Oh, I
there's
love
that
that.
aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I recently was doing something about like, vitamin D and because it's in
Yeah.
seasonal affective disorder is such a big topic. And one of the things that they talk about is like getting outside, being in the sun. which
Yeah.
plays a part even in sleep, because these have been my two hyperfixations, I feel like, lately, is like sleep and being outside. But it literally, like, all of the studies that I keep running into talk about, like, you have to be outside. You
Yeah.
have to regulate your system, and the only way to regulate it sometimes is being outside in that sun. Like, I have
Yeah.
all these fake lights for filming purposes, but these aren't doing anything for my system
Yeah.
right now. I'm stuck in this little dark corner. I need to go outside, and I feel so much better. So I feel like we do have to, like you're saying, like the eco psychology, like we make it scientific so people take it seriously. But these are things that we've known forever without the scientific name.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in terms of like working with clients in that realm, it's really scaffolded. So we're not like, let's go all in on all these things because it can feel really overwhelming. So usually like when, I work with somebody, we figure out what their goal is, and then we kind of scaffold it based on these three groups. So the mind, body, earth groups. And then like, what do you want to start with? We always start with some sort of earth-based, like 5 minutes outside, like always.
Mhm.
But we don't always like start with herbal allies. We don't always start with, the deeper cognitive work. Sometimes it's just like, where in your body do you feel stress? So we find these ways to like build the awareness and build the habits in a like a stepping stone kind of way. So they're not just like, oh, this is too overwhelming. I'm not going to drink this herbal tea and go outside every day and write down my greatest fears and the narratives I hold about myself and my value. So we don't do all of it at the same time so that it actually feels supportive and doable.
Yeah, no, because we sometimes overload ourselves. Like, we wanna do the tea and the journal and going outside, and then it's like, then nothing happens.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's always great to do it that way. I know we were talking about, your journey and how the different things that you've mentioned about your mental health journey and how you would describe it. Uh, what were some of the early signs that something inside you needed that intention and that care that you so needed right then?
Yeah, I think some of the earliest signs was the stomach pain.
Mhm.
I just and I will say I do have some GI things, so wasn't completely in my head, but because of the thinking, it was actually causing physiological damage in my stomach. Like there's a lot of new evidence it's probably not even new, that,
Mhm.
stress can increase stomach acid, which can give you
Mhm.
inflammation in your stomach. And so I think for me, the first thing was like, oh no, my stomach is just killing me. Like my ears are hot. Like I was starting to notice kind of that typical anxiety feeling, sweaty palms, heart palpitations, hot ears, stomach pain. And that was like when I was in middle school where I
Mhm.
started to notice those things. But it really took until high school or even after high school to identify that they were coming from my psychology. I kept thinking it was like the world or like my circumstances or like, and yes, those things obviously influence the emotional experience, but it took a while for me to realize that like, oh, if I can support my my thinking, then I can improve some of what's going on in here, even if the outside circumstances stay the same. But yeah, I would say the physiological stuff was the earlier signs.
Mhm. Was there a moment where you thought, "I can't keep doing this way?"
Yeah, that wasn't until my 20s. That wasn't
Oh,
until
boy.
it took a while to like fully step into like, okay, I need help. Because I kept thinking I could, I was seeing therapists but I wasn't really taking it super seriously. And then in my 20s, after like the fifth panic attack over some fear of abandonment that wasn't coming from reality, it was coming from some internal experience. I was like, whoa, if I don't, like, now I'm in 25 or, 23 or something like that. And if I don't get help now, like, am I just going to be miserable for the rest of my life? Because it
Hmm.
kept coming in cycles, like where I would do well for a little while. And then because I hadn't really learned solid tools, it kept coming back. I would do well for a little while, it would kept coming back. And so I had to sit with myself and was like, wow, you're gonna need to change something, or you're just gonna keep going this way where you feel good for, a couple months and then you feel bad again. And that was when I finally got into DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. That was
Nice.
the time that I was like, we need some like solid behavioral change because my behavior was making everything just so much worse.
Mhm. And so finding that modality and finding, like, something very concrete seemed to be super beneficial for you.
Absolutely. I honestly like credit DBT with like saving my life, because at that point I had been in talk therapy long enough to understand where things were coming from, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't seeing any difference in the way that I was responding to the emotions that were coming up. Even though I understood where the emotions were coming from, it wasn't until someone said, okay, great, you understand it. Now here are some tools to help you make a different choice,
Mm.
instead of letting that fear like take you down into the rabbit hole where you have a panic attack. Here is a way you can shift your behavior to stop that in its tracks. And
Mm.
so, yeah, DBT was like super essential in kind of putting the two pieces together, of like, here's how we understand it, here's how we actually change it.
Mm-hmm. So talk therapy was the start, and then DBT was kind of that clincher, that turning point for
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
Now I know you are a proponent for traditional therapy, and you're a proponent for this kind of other, I go naturalistic kind of therapy
Mhm,
as well. I know you're also a coach.
mhm.
So can you talk to me, because it seems like that's a big like controversy. I don't know why it's a controversy, but a big like conversation in the mental health sphere of like coach versus therapist versus like traditional, non-traditional therapy. So could you speak a little bit about that for me?
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to go back to school. I do want to get my master's in, probably, I don't know if social work or clinical psychology yet. Um,
Mhm.
but I do think that having that knowledge base is important. The one thing that I notice and that clients have told me after like coming to me from talk therapy is that they just notice sometimes their talk therapists, and I think in some cases this is probably a legal thing, that they don't actually give any advice. And so like sometimes people, they're not looking for you to tell them what to do, but they're looking for the questions, like asking the right questions to lead them, to like actually guide them to the answer. And one of the
Mhm.
things that even in my experience with talk therapy is that I would have therapists sometimes who, like at a certain point, like my self-awareness got so great that I would be like, I did this, and they would just be like, oh, or how does that make you feel? Or that's understandable, trying to be that affirmative kind of voice. But at a certain point, that's not what I needed anymore. I needed someone to
Mm.
be like, okay, so you were doing that, and we know that that's because of this. But like, what would it be like if you made a different choice? And that
Mhm.
was the difference I see in coaching, is that coaches are getting paid privately. We're not tied to the system. As long as we're not giving any like health related advice, we can really do more advice giving and guidance in that way. And I think a lot of people are really looking for that
Mm.
now, like at a certain point. I think both are really valuable. I think I wouldn't have made it where I was today without traditional talk therapy helping me uncover and unearth some of that stuff. But then I think that modalities like DBT can mimic coaching in a lot of ways, because it gives you that different approach. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, and I think coaching has such a great place in the mental health healing world, and I wish that there were ways to like cover it under insurance. And I know it would need to be like better regulated and all these things, so I understand
Mhm.
the challenges of that. But I know a lot of people who didn't really see major shifts until they switched into coaching, or like even life coaching. I'm a somatic cognitive behavioral coach and nutrition coach, so like it's a kind of a different, but even just like blanket life coaches, I know a lot of people who have had a ton of um, really great experience with them. I think another difference that I've noticed a lot is that a lot of coaches have the lived experience that a lot of therapists do not. A lot of therapists
Mm.
only understand the theory because they went to school, and so they logically get it, but they can't embody the experience of their clientele. And so that's a huge difference too, because even if you're a therapist and you can understand the experience, there are limitations to like how much you can divulge to your clients, how much you can share with them about your experience. And so people are
Yes.
very careful and kind of cagey because legally, there are other things going on. Whereas coaches can just be like, oh yeah, I'm
Like,
saying
girl, I've been there. And it's like
exactly.
sometimes I can see
Exactly.
like I think like, and I'm not bringing up this conversation because I know there are some people who have these conversations and they're very like, no, you need to do therapy. It's
Yeah.
like all of this. I think I think everything kind of has their place. And I do think you're right. Like we are cautioned in school
Mhm.
against advice giving. But
Right.
I think what you say is like some people are looking for more of a challenge and
Mhm.
like to be challenged in some of their thinking versus someone just validating their thinking. And I think
Exactly.
that's the key that with the because I do hear like I follow there's a therapist called Mean Older Sister Therapist and so she's like sometimes I challenge my clients and I'll say things or they see it on my face that it's like was that that was a choice, and I think
Mhm.
that's people are looking for authenticity,
Yeah.
and sometimes in traditional therapy it doesn't seem like they get that authenticity that they need in order
Yeah.
to progress. You mentioned somatic CBT. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that? I know we're getting into the weeds. We'll come back to your journey in a second, but
Oh,
I
sure.
think
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to hear about coaching in that sense.
Yeah. So somatic CBT is essentially kind of what I mentioned in the beginning of like how your physiology holds emotional experience, trauma, and how you can connect that mind body piece. So how you can connect the narratives, the stories, the beliefs, the perspectives, the perceptions of things with the physical sensations in the body, and how you clear that stuff out. Because a lot of times, when we do only the mind work and we don't feel it in the body, we can get flooded by physical sensation. Like we talk a lot in therapy about like flooding of the emotion, like we're flooded with the emotional experience. But what happens when you're able to kind of comprehend the emotional experience, but your physiology is still flooded? So in your
Mhm.
mind, like, and I started to notice this as I was shifting in my own journey, was like my mind gets it. I understand where this is coming from, but why can I not calm down? Like why
Yes.
still? And it's like, oh, because my physiology is like, you're not safe, you're not safe, you're not safe. And there are like wiring systems in our nervous system, which you probably already know this, but like wiring
Mhm.
systems in our nervous system that actually, like every time we do a repeated behavior. So, I'll share one of mine, but in the past, I had an extreme fear of abandonment. And, let's say I call my boyfriend, he doesn't pick up the phone, and my physical body is like, you need to call him, you need to like know what's going on right now. And so I would call, 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 call. And so as I understood where that was coming from, my brain is like, don't call, go do something else. But my body, like my nervous system is like, no, you have to, because it's been conditioned to do the same activity over and over and over. So, what somatics can help you do is to help you actually feel into that discomfort of your body saying, do that now, because that's the muscle memory that we have. And me having to actually do something physical and mental to say no, 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 we're going to do something else. So sometimes
Mhm.
it's just like literally physically shaking off the energy. There are hummings that like activate the vagus nerve that can help kind of open up your chest, kind of release that energy. And so that's really what somatics is. It's like, how do we, yes, rewire our brain cognitively, but then rewire the entire system. And so the somatic CBT is just that mind body link. Like they're
No, which
so
is it's so important. I think that's where traditional therapy sometimes fails is because we recognize that the body is important, but we don't know how to get there. We only know how to address the intellectual part of it. And a lot of people are very highly aware of what they're thinking, but the
exactly.
whole disconnection between the body thing. But it sounds almost like you're like, hey, you're gonna have to be uncomfortable to get through
Yes.
this.
Yes. And that's a huge part of somatic work too, is like there's this concept called pendulation where you feel the discomfort and then you also kind of identify a spot in your body that doesn't feel discomfort. And so it's this way of kind of like moving back and forth between the discomfort and the feeling of ease so that you can start to like open that window of tolerance. And I think that's a lot of what, a lot of people who go into therapy and stuff are afraid of. And somatic, like when I see, and this is just my personal opinion on somatics, but when I see those retreats, where people are like convulsing and stuff, I, unless there's like a really good kind of catch afterward to kind of help nurse the nervous system back before sending someone back out into the real life, I personally don't approach somatic therapy like that.
Mm.
Because I think sometimes when you open the floodgates of the body, that can cause like chronic illness. Like there are ways of doing it that are more gentle, um, and that actually help to kind of ease you into the healing, like where the
Mhm.
discomfort isn't so much that it's like now it's open and you're flooded and you don't know what to do
Yeah.
after that. Um, but yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, no, no. Sometimes like I say with clients, I was like, you got to pick your hard. It's like going down these behaviors that are not so helpful is going to end up being hard. But then if you choose the path of going through the uncomfortable, it's going to be hard. But where do we go? You got to pick your hard
Right.
some days. All
Yeah.
right. So, what led you to start speaking publicly about your mental health?
Like I mentioned, I this all started when I was a preteen. And back then, like preteen years, even into my, after high school, I was just like, I'm going to be miserable forever. Like there was a point in time where I just had accepted my fate, that I'm going to be an anxious person. That's just who I am. That's my life experience. And then cause I'm from Los Angeles originally, and then I
Mhm.
moved to Western Massachusetts, where my mom is from, in 2017. And when I got there, I had just come off of my DBT journey, like a 3 month or 4 month program. And so I was like, I'm good, I'm fixed. But when I got to the East Coast, I wasn't keeping up with my DBT. And obviously, I'd built a lot of really bad habits around my mental health. And so when I got there, I really went into like a dark night of the soul. And I checked myself into a residential treatment program that focused on DBT. I was like, I need to get out of my day to day. Like it was my final straw. And after I went to this program, I was there for 2 weeks. And because I'd already been learning DBT ahead of time, I was kind of like primed for this experience. But when I got out, I like something went off. It's like some light bulb was like, oh, you can do this. Like you're going
Mm.
to be good. You're going to recover. And then I was like, I need to tell all the young children who were like me, who thought that they were never going to be okay and would never find tools for healing, because I really thought I was just destined for this terrible, terrible life, feeling awful all the time. And it's not true. So, literally, on my drive home, I stopped for lunch and I looked up youth speaker agency and found Minding Your Mind. And I sent them an application that day. And they called me back like 2 days later.
I
And it
love
was
it.
that quick because I was like, I just want young people to know that it's not forever. And, even though that I was like very shortly after treatment, and healing is cyclical, you can have your ups and your downs. And I had a couple after that. But I can safely say that, like, after that experience, my trajectory has just been pretty steadily on the up cycle. And now, like 8 years after joining Minding Your Mind, I'm better than I've ever been, which
I
still
love
shocks
it.
me days, to be honest.
Really? What's the most
But
shocking thing about it for you?
the other day I was leaving the house and I realized I have been off of pharmaceutical medication for like 3.5 years. And
Wow.
which, the meds were, I needed them for a while. And I'm super grateful that they exist. But it was always something for me, like in my value system of like, I don't want to be relying on just the pharmaceutical industry just because, I don't want to have to like, it would get stressful sometimes. You go out of town, you don't have enough med, like just being in that world, not knowing how it really impacts my overall, physical health, because there's so many
Mhm.
side effects. It was important to me. And so for me, it's like, wow, I not only have been off meds for, 3.5 years, because I got off of it when I was pregnant with my second baby. But I also haven't cycled like in 3.5 years. Like I have not had this kinds of cycles I used to have,
Wow.
um, really big highs and lows, and um, and I was just kind of shocked. I was like, is this like, because that's enough time to know if it's like a rebound effect or not. Sometimes when
Yeah.
you off meds, especially after having babies or big hormonal things, I was like, maybe it's just the hormones, but
Yes.
like, like making me happy. But now it's been 3.5 years. I haven't been breastfeeding for a while. So like the hormones are back to normal and I'm still okay. And so that
Mhm.
was like, wow, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
No, that is a big deal. I'm so happy for you because
Thank
that's
you.
a lot of shifts that had to happen before you could get to that place. Because I
Yeah.
know medication is such a hot topic too, and I always say it's a tool. It doesn't have to be a forever tool. It can be
Yeah.
a temporary tool, and I mean that that speaks to all of this work that you've done in the moments and how you've come to this place. So kudos to that. I'm so happy for
Thank
you, my
you.
friend. I might be one of those therapists that you kind of get mad at because when you use the words like happy, sad, or angry, I'm asking you to find a better word, which is why it's so important to have a big emotional vocabulary. But don't worry, you do not have to carry around a thesaurus or keep asking Google what a different word is for the feeling that you're trying to get at. I created a resource on arizainspire.com called the Feelings Wheel. And with this Feelings Wheel, it helps you get to the bottom of what emotion you are feeling. But don't worry, it's not just a wheel with different colors and different words. I do add journal prompts. I do add a different technique, something that can help you on your own get to the bottom of the emotions you are feeling, because you're not alone in figuring out what this emotion thing means. So head over to arizainspire.com and download this free, did I say it was free? Because hey, it's free. This free resource to help you broaden that emotional vocabulary language. Please understand that emotional vocabulary is crucial in order to regulate your emotions, and you don't have to do that on your own. So let's get back to the episode. So I know you talked about like you were so excited to talk to people about your story, but was there any hesitations or fears around sharing your journey?
I think not like I've always been a really blunt, honest, vulnerable person, like for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. And like, I don't like really care what people think about me, like a little bit, but not. The only thing I think I worried about was like my family, because, a lot of us who struggled with mental health things in our childhoods, like it came from how we were raised. And so I think the biggest concern I had was like, if my family hears some of my stories, if they're going to feel bad about,
Mm.
things that they've done in the past. But I was really honest with them about what I shared and why, and they were all really receptive to it. So I think it's okay. But yeah, that in the beginning was my biggest concern, was like, I need to do it because I know it's important for me and I know it's important for these kids to hear it. And I also understand there are other people that I'm going to be referring to.
So how did you decide what parts of your story to share or to keep private?
I mean, Minding Your Mind definitely helped. John Madelman was very great in helping me craft my particular talk.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing was like, where were the moments that felt the most impactful to me,
Mm-hmm.
and that really seemed to kind of shift my mental health for the worst. And one of the things I always talk about, especially since becoming a mom myself, is like, our parents are human. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that in the beginning of my mental health journey. I really wanted to blame them and be the victim. And I think that's a process we all have to go through in our healing journey, is like being a bit mad at how we were raised. It's understandable.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you're like, they also were struggling with their own things. And
Yeah.
they also did the best that they could. And, at the time, it wasn't what I needed. And now I can handle it because I'm an adult. And now adult Brooke is at the forefront. Baby Brooke is protected. She's safe. Um, yeah, so I think I just chose them based on what was really impactful and pivotal for me, not in a way that's going to like demonize my family in any
Mm-hmm.
way, because I don't believe we are victims. I think we can be, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah.
In my particular case, I don't think I was a victim,
Mm-hmm.
to a degree, but not to the point where like toxic, need to cut them out for eternity kind of way, which there are cases where that is necessary, but in mine, it wasn't.
No, no, no. I know it's a bad joke, so I'm going to preface it with I know it's a bad joke, but I always like joke around. I was like, I wonder what I'm going to be paying for therapy for my kids later on in life. I wonder.
I
I know I've made
it,
mistakes. I'm a human, so I'm like, I wonder what they'll be talking to their therapists about, just
it
because
is
I've been on the other
inevitable.
side. I just
I hear
wonder.
you. I hear you. It's
It's
inevitable. I mean,
Yeah, no, because it's an impact, and I know that I've made mistakes, but it's a bad joke. But I'm like, I feel that in my soul. I'm like, We're going to
Yeah,
be at that other side of I'm going to be on the other side, and someone's going to be hearing about me, and they're going to question things, but we did the
totally.
best we can. We did the best we
Absolutely.
can. I noticed, like, I was scrolling on Instagram before hopping on here, and so I noticed that you had posted something about moms and a specific focus on moms. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's part of your journey. So can you speak a little bit about that and kind of what kind of pushed you towards, like, maybe speaking to moms a little bit more too?
Yeah, I think motherhood is the most important role, really. Like we grow our children in our bodies, our eggs are in our bodies when we're still in our mother's bodies. Like there's a extraordinary maternal line and lineage that really matters for who we are as people, even
Mm-hmm.
if we don't remember it, even if, like our mother's physical stress when they're pregnant with us impacts us as we are born, so like right from the jump. And I think there's also a lot of stigma behind mothers not being able to fully, express how hard motherhood really is. And I think that's part of the reason why so many mothers are struggling. And so part of the reason of, wanting to focus on that demographic is like, one, yes, I'm a mother and it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Some days are so much harder than
Ooh,
others.
yes.
And I really just want us to feel supported because I think that, women, if we can feel supported and we can show up in our children's lives and in our own lives in sustainable, honest, authentic ways, like the world is just going to be a better place. And I think sometimes I see that there's these two camps of like push through and just like do what you need to do, overextend, kind of be
Mm,
your kids everything, or like, nah, they can handle it, they're fine. And I know that there's this sweet middle ground of like honesty, nurturing, and care, and also like helping guide the children and not coddling them or not just throwing them to the wolves or, like I
yeah,
think, and I think the way that we can get to that actual place is by taking care of ourselves and
exactly.
encouraging our own emotional growth, not just for our kids, because they're going to grow up and they're going to have their own families and they're going to go off. Then where are we at that
Yeah.
point? And so wanting like to really focus on that care
Yeah.
now,
And
not being a
giving,
mom.
yeah, I mean, even doing it for ourselves, but our kids are going to see it. And
Yeah,
how much of a legacy are we going to leave by showing them that we thought we were worth it for this time, so you can have this time too. And you're right, it's
absolutely.
so hard for people to understand that. We were watching a show last night, The Middle, and the mom was stressed out, and she's like, I'm going to take 15 minutes. She went to a restroom and just turned off her phone for 15 minutes, and she turned
Mm,
it on, and all hell had broken loose. And she went to her house, and a cop was there, and he's like, "They said that they were trying to reach you." She's like, "Well, I
mm,
just turned my phone off for 15 minutes." But he's like, "But you're a mom."
mm.
And turned to my husband, and he's like, "Oh my gosh." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's real.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
real." Like, if I turn my phone off, even if I was just to, like, take a shower, which is like normal basic hygiene,
yeah,
and it's like, I took a shower, I missed a phone call, all hell broke loose, and now they're blaming me because I wasn't
yeah,
there. So
yeah.
you're right. It's definitely a need. And it's definitely
Mhm.
something that I don't think is always focused on. And I think there is a sweet spot to it that we haven't completely gotten to just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I think, like a thing I notice often is also like the self-care can be very like the self-care that's pushed on us. Like go to the spa, which I love. Going to the
Same.
spa, getting your hair done, get it like I advocate for all those things, but I think there needs like a beat to be a both and because those things are great for like temporary relief. I go to the spa all the time when I need a respite. But I also do the hard work of like
Mhm.
getting into my own brain, understanding why I'm doing things, understanding why I'm being triggered by my kids. And I think both can coexist and need to coexist. Because you go to the spa, you come back, the house is still the same. The kids are
Yes.
maybe having a worse tantrum because you just went. So how can you actually show up better? You're a little bit more regulated because you had a nice spa time. But like if you're
Mhm.
not also doing that inner work, the same it's you're just going to be amped up again in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I like
Definitely.
I want there to be like both of those things living side by side, like that cognitive work, the somatic work, getting into your body, taking care of your vessel, going to the spa, relaxing, like both of those things
Yeah.
together.
I think one way that I've talked about self-care that I really love, and yes, it's connected to one of the presentations I do, but the idea of your self-care being connected to your values and what's foundational to you, and really connecting self-care to those values.
Yeah.
And like, how do we make those connections? Like I always talk about, um, I'm competitive. Go figure. I'm competitive. So when I do something healthy for myself, sometimes it does involve a little bit of competition because that's something that drives me. That's foundational to who I am. And so, or even like intellectually wise, like my brain sometimes has trouble turning off. So I like to do some easy puzzles or like even like crafting, building things with my hands because I need something. Sometimes I need something to show that I've done something with my time. I know productivity, I don't need to be productive in my self care, but there's a part of me that feels like I need to. But these are
Yeah.
all connected to who I am. And no, they're not aesthetic because sometimes we do aesthetic self care. But
Right.
these are things that make me feel fulfilled. And I think when we do connect to those values, like
Mhm.
you said, it's that inner work that needs to be done in order to kind of really feel fulfilled overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I love values work. It's
Yes.
so essential. And most people have never done it. I do some values workshops, and I once walked into a room of maybe like 45 people between the ages, all genders, between the ages of like 40 and maybe 65. And I was like, you've probably all done this, like, because I was the youngest in the room. I was like, you've probably all thought about your values many times over, but
No.
just to get an understanding, like how many of you have done any values work, thought about what you value, how it relates to your life and your behavior, and literally not a single person raised their hand.
Nope.
Not one. I was like, whoa, we're going
Yeah.
through our whole lives not understanding what we personally value. So how are we behaving? How do we understand what we're behaving? Sorry, the trash truck just on
No
the
worries.
horn for some reason.
But no, you're right. We don't look at that. And our values are so important. Even like when we worry, I try to frame it as you're worried because it's triggering something that was valuable to you. Like if I'm worrying about my kids, it's because my kids are valuable to me and I love
Yep.
them and care for them. So if we can even frame worry into values. And if we don't know what those are, we're just going to be thinking, I'm just freaking out over nothing.
Yeah.
And no, you're freaking out because something you treasure and important to you is happening and you just need to see it as
Absolutely.
a signal. So
Yep.
I love that. I think that is super important.
Mhm.
So I know we talked about DBT,
Mhm.
and I know we've talked about some somatic work. Are there other practices or things that help you kind of regulate and get back to yourself when you're feeling, heavy or overwhelmed that you haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, I think physical exercise. I love exercise. Like there are times where, I feel really bad in the week or like just stressed, like overstressed. And I'm like, oh, I haven't worked out this entire week, like intentionally moved my body. And then I go take my Legree class, come back, and I'm like a different person.
Mhm.
Yeah, physical exercise is top notch. And nutrition, honestly. I used to think that, I grew up in Los Angeles as a child actor. Like I was in the entertainment industry my whole life. And so the ways that I used to eat really were just because I wanted to look a certain way. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until I got older that I started to notice like the things that I eat really impact how I feel, both physically and emotionally. And so nutrition and cooking, like taking the time to actually cook for myself as a self-care method, because I do love to cook, and making things that are going to feel good in my body has been really, really prime. And my kids like cook with me all the time. Like they're my
Oh, I
little
love
sous chefs
it.
now. So that's been really great to teach them too. Of like this, we're not just cooking for sustenance. Like, yes, that's a part of it, but we're also cooking because we care about ourselves, like we want to feed ourselves things that are going to be good for us in the long run. We
Mhm.
also enjoy our food. So we're not like, no sugar ever, no this ever, no, we're not that hard, but also how are we really nurturing and nourishing ourselves? So that one is really key for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's so much research coming out with the nutrition and the effects on our bodies and how it
Mhm.
even affects like hormones and all of the things in our bodies. And I think that's something that is heavily neglected. And even like doctors are not necessarily educated on it. And it drives me crazy. Sometimes I
Sure.
feel like I come off very anti doctor, but I'm just like, you need to be like informed for yourself a lot of times because you
Yes.
trust them, but there's still so much lack of knowledge in certain places.
It's true. There's so many gaps, and I really think it's because they don't continue their education. And that's the thing too, is with some therapists sometimes is you can tell like they haven't continued their education. Like if I walk into a therapy room and they don't ever ask me what I eat, I struggle
Mm,
because I'm like, you don't think it matters that I'm feeling anxious at 9 a.m. after I just had a coffee on an empty stomach? You really haven't thought about
mhm.
why that might be, but like they often don't.
Yeah.
My doctor, yeah.
Or sleep. Sleep is the other one. When people are like, "Oh, I didn't get good sleep." I'm like, and then you wonder why you feel like a mess today.
Yeah,
Like,
your capacity's reduced. Great.
reduced. Ugh. I was like, I'm not happy if I haven't slept, and I'm in that luteal phase right now, so my sleep is
Mm,
jacked, and I girl,
yeah.
so I
Ugh.
feel that. But I think it's
Mm.
also because I have a weird preoccupation with sleep because I never get any, so, kids.
I know. My daughter woke me up a bunch last night and I was like, "Ooh, I feel a little snappy this morning." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, because I didn't sleep very well last night." And so you
Nope.
just gotta understand that's that self-awareness piece. You understand that you can give yourself a break and then you can find ways to kind of cope for the
Mm.
day and get better sleep, hopefully tonight.
Yes, yes. I'm like, I'm gonna be overhauling our whole bedtime, nighttime routine because I need it. They need it. We all need to get our acts together. Um,
Yeah.
but what's a common myth about healing that you'd love to dismantle?
I think the biggest one is that once you can be healed, like that you can fully be like just healed, you're self-actualized, you're going to be zen like all the time, you're going to be calm, nothing's going to rattle your cage ever. I don't personally know any human being on the planet that doesn't experience some type of stress.
Mm,
And that's something I think that we often mix up, this idea that like, oh, if we do the healing work, like we're just going to be cool, like nothing's going to bother us ever again. And there's just too many variables into why something could be bothering you in a moment to ever reach that state. And even when people use this term calm, like I posted a video the other day about like the point of self nervous system regulation is not
yes,
to be in a zen like peace
I
state.
love that one. I say
and,
that one all the time.
and I posted it on TikTok and someone was like, okay, but I'm going to be calm first. And I was like, do you know what the actual definition of calm is? Calm is to be completely free of upsetting emotions, to be in a state of pure serenity and tranquility. That, in my experience, is not possible. It might be possible in a moment, but
Mhm.
to be that in that state of calm forever, especially as a mother, is literally an impossibility. Like
Yeah.
the point of our children screaming is to set off our fight or flight
Mhm.
emergency. That is literally the point of it. So why would
Mm,
you want to turn off that biological, activation forever? What happens then if our kid is actually in danger the way they think they are? Then we won't be able to even respond in the way that our body needs to. So the point, of healing is not to turn off that alarm system because it keeps us alive. The point is to dampen it, to turn the
yes.
volume down, and to help yourself become aware in a moment to say, oh, my kid is screaming at the top of his lungs because I didn't give him a second. My kid just did this morning. I didn't give him a second banana and peanut butter because we're about to have breakfast. And in his brain, it's the end of the world. But
Yes.
it doesn't have to be the end of the world for me. I
No.
don't have to go into overdrive and start screaming at him and tell him to sit down and we're going to eat. I don't need to do that.
No.
My alarm system is working properly. How do I turn that volume down? By understanding his experience, understanding what's happening in my body, and then using some sort of tool to like
Yes.
dampen that. So that's the myth, is like healing means calm, serene, tranquil all the time.
Yes. It's balanced. I'm staying here the whole entire time. I'm like, heck no, that's not possible. I
That
feel like,
seems like numbness, you know?
oh my gosh, yes. I'm like, that's really boring. Cause then we got to
Yeah.
get rid of everything. Cause then we can't
Yeah.
do anything. And I was like, the whole idea is that if I go up, I can come back down. If I'm down, I can come back up. That I was
Yeah.
like, balance is just I can get back to a baseline where I'm good,
Yeah.
whether I'm thrown. And I think that I love that. I saw that video. I was like, yes, yes. Tell me, Brooke. That's what I've been yelling at the rooftops. I'm glad I'm not yelling alone.
Oh yeah, it's important because especially as like nervous system regulation and stuff becomes so much more trendy, is like
Mm-hmm.
there really is this illusion that they're gonna give you one like somatic breakthrough and then you're gonna just be like, oh, they're screaming. You know, like
Yeah.
sorry.
No, no,
But
they're
we can't turn
screaming.
down the volume.
Yes. Yes, it's
Yeah.
recognizing they're upset about something, so I need to help them. This is to push me to help them, and that's
Mhm.
okay. But I don't
Right.
need to freak out in the process of trying to help them. Their freak out doesn't have to freak me out. And that's
Exactly.
it's important. I think that's the big thing that's lost is that we are
Yeah.
going to we're going to be triggered, but it's we have to be able to we can handle it. And I think
Exactly.
that's the message that's been lost is that we can't like we can handle whatever's thrown our way. Any activation is not the end of the world.
Exactly. And that's the big thing that I think we struggle with. This is like I see it all the time in leadership, in parenting, even in not just in relationships. Like you see the leadership where, there are unhappy employees and they just panic. And so they start like doubling down on things that aren't right and like trying to fix it really quick without actually just like taking a step back and looking at this objective view of like what is actually happening here. I can handle this. I do not have to panic. I do not have to run away. I do not have to try to demonize somebody else and victimize myself. What do we need? And like that's that point. It's just like there's this buffer point that we're missing nowadays.
Mhm.
We're taught to just like run, 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 go, 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 get it done, fix it, do da 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 da. And so we miss that buffer. So how do we
Mhm.
regulate our nervous system enough to give ourselves even just like 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds of like, hold on, alarm system, come back down. Because I used to say too, like, you have this peak, and most of us act on the peak of
Yes.
emotion. We act, but it comes, like you were saying, it comes back
Back
down.
down.
Maybe we should wait until
Yes.
the peak comes down to
Yes, and
act
you're yeah, and people are like, "I can't think straight." Of course you can't think straight. You
and don't
you
think.
when you're activated, you narrow. And so of course you're missing out on all these possibilities. And so you
Yeah.
have to take if you want to think logically, if you want to access the part of your brains that right now you can't, you have to take that step back. You
Yeah,
have to.
absolutely.
And I think people miss out on that. All right. For anybody who's listening who might be feeling stuck or discouraged, what would you want them to hear?
I would want them to hear that they are not alone,
Mm,
uh, and that feeling and experience does not mean that you are broken.
mm,
It means you are having a human experience, and being human. Me and my daughter actually had this conversation. She's 4.5. We had this conversation the other night that being human is one of the hardest things we will ever do. Just being alive, just navigating this crazy world, navigating our own bodies. And it's also one of the most beautiful and joyful. So being able
mm.
to hold the duality, this is why I love dialectical
Yes.
behavioral therapy. Like, how do we hold both realities? Sometimes life is really sucky.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes life is really amazing. So like remembering that both of those two things can coexist together
Mm-hmm.
is just like the thing you need to like hold on and make it to the next moment,
Mm-hmm.
because every moment is a new opportunity to shift and
Yes.
change and be better and sometimes be worse and like to keep going.
Yes. No, I love that. I say that all the time. These we can have both. And it's good because the good is what we're looking for when we're feeling only all of the suck.
And one last thing I want to say too is to find the opportunity in the suck, because for a long time I saw the suck as like a attack on me, and it was like actually now I'm starting to reframe it to like, what can this teach me about myself? Some
Mm.
things it's not going to teach me anything. But the reality is that we are always responsible for our responses. And so sometimes, even when somebody's attacking me and I'm like, I didn't do anything, and it's true, there's still something I can learn about what's happening. So like, what is the lesson? Because I want to go out of this world being a better version of myself than when I came into this world. I know that that's one of the values I hold. So how can we find that thing that's going to make us just even 1% better?
Yeah, there's power in the reframe. You sometimes you have to, yes, I know we're looking at a picture, but sometimes we have to frame the picture a little bit differently. And there's power in that different perspective that we can lose out on. What is one word that describes your mental health right now?
One word that describes my mental health right now, I would probably say stable.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Stable. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
That's where
Feels
we all
good.
want to be. Where we all want to be. But thank you so much for coming and talking to me, Brooke. I hope you really enjoyed I know I enjoyed our conversation. This was really good. But thank you again so much for joining us. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
But that's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you found something helpful, enjoyable, or just even validating, I'd love if you'd follow the show, give us a like, write a review, or even share it with someone who might need it. Are you looking for more assistance on your mental health journey? Then I think you need to head over to arizainspire.com. We have different resources that can help you depending on where you are in your own mental health journey. Whether you need to learn more about your emotions, whether you're learning more about techniques to help you when you're in a panic, or even just understanding what emotions are, period. We have some tools there for you. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok at Ariza Inspire Co., where we keep this conversation going and we talk about, day-to-day tips on mental health, as well as what's going down in current events sometimes. Not too many. My mental health needs me not to be too in the news right now. But we do talk about what else is coming up for Ariza Inspire Co., as well as different episodes for this podcast. But at the end of the day, my friend, I want you to take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.